is for anyone who wants to be the new FBI director. And did anyone see this? There were 12 questions, and question number 11 was, what was it exactly? Вы понимаете этот вопрос? А, нет. Б, да, все идет по плану. So, do you understand this question? If yes, everything's going as according to plan. I bring this up because this is supposed to be an English language event, but I have a feeling just about everybody could answer question number 11. But I'm not entirely sure, and
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, okay. All right. So in that case, and since we are also simulcasting here, hello there, hello world, then I guess we should speak in English, sadly or happily. But anyway, welcome. Thank you all for coming to this event. I know that this is a very difficult time of year for anyone on an academic calendar, so that the idea that you could take a break from either preparing for or grading exams, writing or reading papers is really impressive. Anyway, so I'm Elliot Borenstein, professor of Russian and Slavic Studies, and I edit the blog All the Russias for the Jordan Center, and the Jordan Center is very happy to host our friends from Meduza. But first, I want to introduce my co-host.
My name is Sergey Sanovich. I'm a PhD student at the Department of Politics. I'm also thrilled to have our guests from Meduza. We have Galina Timchenko, after an illustrious career in the best Russian daily of the 90s, Kommersant. She joined Len.ru and eventually led the media to become the most popular Russian news website. We have Ivan Kolpakov. He started his career in media in the Russian city of Perm in the Urals, so he knows Russia beyond the capitals, and now is editor-in-chief of Meduza. And we have Anna Veduta. She was working as a press secretary to the Russian opposition politician Alexei Navalny, and now is editor-in-chief of the Meduza in English and global outreach director, i.e. God, at Meduza. We are happy to have you here, and I guess we should start the discussion.
I'd like to start with the easiest possible question, but it's one I've been curious about for years. And I read Meduza in both languages every day quite religiously. Why Meduza? Is this Greek mythology or a love of jellyfish? Because it means both.
Galina loves to tell this story. You start. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for having us here.
This is about our stupidness.
It's all about mistakes and our silliness. Thank you for having us here, and I'm glad to be here. And I'm happy, besides this strange fact, that you've had to hear my poor English for some time. Sorry, guys.
But usual
problems with Russian. Yes. Why Meduza? Meduza. It's our silliness because when we started this new project, I explained to my colleagues what did I want to achieve. I said directly, guys, I do not. Definitely, we will be blocked in Russia. And I do not want those stupid mirrors, mirror1, blah, blah, blah.com, mirror2, blah, blah, blah.com. I want to be redirected to our content without any difficulties. So I said, I just want if they want to cut off our head, we will rise. Cut, rise, cut, rise. And one guy sitting opposite to me, he said, Meduza? I said, no, you mean Hydra, but word is great. Because when he pronounced this Meduza, we realized that it's very good word.
It is scary enough, you know.
Scary enough, yeah.
You should be scary.
And it means jellyfish and Meduza Gorgona in mythology.
And can be pronounced in just about every European language.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. Maybe a couple years ago, I spoke with my friend who wanted to name his media like New Russian Word or New Russian World or New Russian blah blah blah. I said, doesn't mean nothing. It will be. It should be a good word, easy to remember and easy to pronounce.
Well, you're very lucky you didn't choose Hydra. For those who follow Marvel comics and movies,
I'm silly enough, but
Yeah.
not so much.
yes,
Yeah.
it's a mixed message at the very least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe speaking of mirrors and maybe smoke, so for a long time when I was giving presentation about Russian internet policy, I started with a screenshot. It was a news story at Meduza about the blocking of, I don't remember, it was 100 or 500 mirror of another Russian news website, Granny.ru,
Right.
that was blocked in Russia and had to create many mirrors to get around this filtering. So my question is, if you at some point in time, God forbid, face the same circumstances that Granny did, do you have a response?
Well, we actually have that experience in two countries in post-Soviet space, in Uzbekistan and in Kazakhstan. So we have these, this button in our application, turn on Meduza in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. It means that our application start using, when you're turning the button on, it starts using Google traffic. So once Google services and Google servers to provide traffic to our application. So one day, Kazakhstan, I think it was Uzbekistan, Uzbekian government decided to block our applications. So the Google actually, you couldn't Google pictures for a couple of days in the whole country because, they had to block the servers of Google. But speaking seriously, well, it works, in Kazakhstan, in Uzbekistan, but we're not trying to work seriously there. We have, small amount of readers in Kazakhstan. In Kazakhstan, I guess more than in Uzbekistan, but it is not our, target market. In Russia, it would be a disaster, more or less, because we are a commercial company. We are actually earning a lot of money on the Russian market, and we have 70% of our readers within Russia, so we are hoping to survive. Granny is one of, I think, two.
The oldest
Yes.
opposition sites.
Yeah, and they name themselves. They saying about themselves, we are fighting Putin regime since 1999, something like this. And they're really fighting.
No.
Since 1912.
Editor-in-chief of Granny.ru worked for Lenta.ru in 1999, since 2000.
Okay, fine, good. So basically, this is not, is this a media? Yes, it is a media, but it is they are, well, we are considering them more as an activists, political activists than journalists. So if you're reading Granny.ru, you definitely know what I mean.
Sure.
Well, since you brought up revenue, I was wondering, I guess every time I see a wonderful thing on the internet that doesn't have pornography, the first question I ask myself is, how are they supporting themselves? How do they survive? How do you support yourselves? If it's pornography, it's okay.
I would prefer, when I'm gonna be tired of being editor-in-chief, I'm gonna start my career in pornography. Probably it's easier to earn money, definitely there. Galina
Much
has to answer.
easier.
Yeah.
We started with advertising, and it was a big surprise. We saw it like a miracle that some companies just wanted to advertise with us, and actually. After 2 years, I definitely think that all these scary tales about those scared to death Russian advertisers who just not to get in connection with opposition sides, it's just scary tales. We started in 2014. Then this economical crisis began, and every advertiser in Russia should decide whether he wants to spend money or to burn money to these stupid media banners, or whether they should do more effective advertising. So we managed to offer them those new formats of native advertising, or so-called branded content. So Year ago, we covered 30% of our budget by advertising revenue. Now we covered 70% of our budget by advertising revenue. And we have a few channels of revenue because we launched special projects of travel guides, online travel guides, and special applications for tourists. We were happy to hire team from Afisha Mir. It was one of the best travel guides in Russia. Just for people, they're absolutely brilliant, and we have great developers team. So we made special travel guides based on revenue. It's totally branded content. So it's another source of revenue. One more source of revenue are our conferences about media and IT and technology and advertising. We organize them in Moscow. And one more source of revenue, but a little bit, it's our summer school of journalism.
So if I could follow up with one question, I'm glad to hear that the scariest stories about advertisers are just scary stories, but I do wonder, I think about a few years ago when Dozh TV Rain almost ceased to exist because of the backlash after they did a survey asking would it have been better simply to surrender Leningrad during World War II or not. And there I understand that the reaction was based on that the problem was the companies that broadcast that carried Dozh.
I mean cable.
Cable.
Yes.
You missed one
Right.
just one thing. At first, they were cut off cable
yes.
TV.
Yes.
Right.
Because of that, they lost
They
all
lost a lot of
their
money.
Exactly.
advertisers.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I
Not
realize.
about,
You know,
it's
it's
not about
different.
website. It's
Right.
all about they lost their cable TV channels.
Of course, but do you think it's at all possible or likely that enough pressure could be put on advertisers to turn away?
Sure.
Yes.
You know, nobody wants to be a target. You know, a couple months ago we faced a shadow of scandal. Pro-Kremlin youth organizations, they just wanted they just began a campaign against us, and they wanted to place special banners just near our advertisers' offices. They were too stupid and too weak, but we lost one advertiser. He said directly, we do not want a shadow of scandal near us. So this is a threat, but actually now we succeed.
I would say that they have tens of instruments, tens of tools to suppress free independent media, including Meduza, and they can use any tool, including dealing with advertisers.
Sure. So speaking of revenue streams, and after the last elections in this country, there was a lot of talk about like partisan media consumption that leads to increasing political partisanship. It seems to me, after reading Meduza, that you have a strategy that can potentially address this problem. You put a lot of emphasis, and judging by the Facebook of your publisher, Leah Krasilchik, you put a lot of work in producing entertainment content, games, GIFs, fun news stories, etc. So my question is, does it have, and also you have a presence on social networks that are not necessarily conducive to Russian independent press, like Odnoklassniki, maybe VKontakte to a lesser extent. So my question is this strategy of providing not only like serious news stories, but also some entertainment, working in bringing additional and different audience, people who otherwise would not read the outlet like yours?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
I have to confess, I'm a copycat. Because when I look at the history of Russian media, I saw those genius media managers like Konstantin Ernst and Oleg Dobrodeyev. They're bad guys, but they're genius. What did they do? They made great entertainment content. They told great stories. They bought great shows, and they rose their audience around this great content. And then they embedded information into the entertainment. So they have those devoted audience, and then they just embedded their mission into this audience. So it's a good strategy, you know. At first, and second, I'm sorry. And second, you know, take a look at your day. Yeah, morning coffee or you know, morning shower, then job, then you go into opera or to date with your girlfriend, something like that. Day is different. You shouldn't have serious 24 hours a day. So we are making picture of the day. So this picture of the day, it contains and serious journalism, flash or bullets about something about news, and entertainment for sure.
This discussion is old as world, you know, as media actually. It was, you know, in 19th century editors of English newspapers discussed, should we be entertaining or should we only inform our readers? And eventually they decided that they have to, you know, both inform and entertain. And if you want to be successful, you know, even now, you need to combine entertainment and serious content. And sometimes you need to, well, actually, this is the only way to tell interesting story, because people, you know, the agenda is absurd, and the reaction of journalists and media has to be the same absurd, you know. So that's why we started, you know, news gamings and producing it like a factory right now. So, but what makes me really optimistic? People, you know, observers, many people in Russian media, from Russian legacy media, they think that we're getting traffic from this, you know, we're getting traffic only on entertaining part of the content, which is bullshit. This is not true. You're getting way more, you know, readers from the serious content. Investigations usually gets more attention from the readership than the entertainment. So, you know, you can compare, and sometimes if you're making something sophisticated, you're making good journalism, it attracts more people than you think.
Sure. So before literature professors among us begin to ask important questions about absurd, let me first finish with surrounding you and the audience. So what do you know about your audience, let's say, at Одноклассники compared to, let's say, Facebook or Twitter? Are they reading the same news stories? Do they leave the same kind of comments on your social media?
No. Well, we know everything about our audience. We know what kind of, you know, readers are.
Now you tell me.
Look at the camera.
You know, this is the internet, guys. This is not about these old traditional newspapers. We really know what kind of people are reading Meduza. How many women, how many men are reading Meduza? Where do they live? What education do they have? This is, you know, an algorithm from Google. Google provides you all kinds of that kind of information. So if we're talking about the product itself, we can say, for example, that 70% of our readers live in Russia, or 62% of our readers are men, unfortunately, male, unfortunately. So we're trying to make it, you know, more gender balanced. But you know, when you're talking about the distribution of the product, you always have to remember what kind of audience do you have in that particular social network or in this particular social network. So Facebook is, you know, is our alternative liberal Russia. So we have, you know, the great fights, the great shitstorms, which we call media srach, you know, in Russia. It happened on Facebook.
That could
Our favorite national game.
Yeah. And so, you know, but Kontakte, for example, this is completely another place where a lot of pupils actually, you know, they are active pupils, schoolboys, students, they are active in Kontakte. And this is not a place for the serious intellectual discussion, but they are way more active and they are way more engaged into what you're actually doing. At the same time, Contact is collaborating with FSB, and you should remember that, because you can be, so all these, you've heard these stories about people who were persecuted in Russia because they posted something, commented something, or reposted something. Everything was in Contact, because Contact collaborates with the intelligence services, well, with the secret services in Russia. So you should remember also, you know, these. Одноклассники is a kind of a, this is a tricky thing. So you're, you know, you're putting content there, and people reading content there, and they never, you know, click in links, because what
There is no conversion at all.
yeah, because people who are using Одноклассники, it is one of the hugest Russian social networks. It is for older people, and this is basically, this is more or less all their environment in the internet. So they are coming to Одноклассники and they're reading news, they're talking to their classmates, writing messages to each other, and that's all.
And look at photos.
Yeah, and you know, and
Pictures.
then putting class under photos, because it is somewhat similar to likes. So you're not getting any traffic from Одноклассники, you're getting a lot of traffic from Contact, but you have to remember that this audience is young and extremely, you know, open-minded. Facebook is a liberal, more or less.
Oh, ethical judge.
And yeah, it is like.
So let's say people from Contact, do they see different kind of stories?
Sure.
Interested in different kind of topics?
And when you have that information, of course, you repackaging your content according to these
We had
audiences.
special product for Facebook, for Contact, for Twitter, and even for our Messenger.
Each social network has its own conception.
Each channel distribution has his own strategy.
Another question about your readers, or consumers, but a different one. Now that you have the English language version, which is again wonderful and a great resource for those of us in the academy teaching their students and all that, I was wondering though, what audience you intend for the English language version, and do you feel like you're reaching it? You're still developing it? What is the overall goal of having an English language version?
Should I take this?
Yeah, you should.
Okay. Well, I think that it's smart to think about that in a way that yes, Russia is a hot topic, but still, like I will not subscribe to the fact that like all Americans, and because I've been living in America for a while right now, they don't know much about Russia. They would like ideally, but this is not what wakes them up in the morning. You know, it's
Well,
not,
now
yeah.
it does. But.
Yeah, well,
But we tried so hard. You know.
they even hired me for that. You know? I elected Trump, now this, you know.
Yeah.
To see.
If you wake
So,
up,
yeah, but
it's
right,
Anna.
yeah, blame it on me. So, but for now, the general concept is to address people who are actually interested in Russia, well, on more professional ways. So, I mean, for example, I took guys over to DC last week, and they were given like also speeches there, and they were given a briefing on the Hill. And I should say that like the room was a public event, but it was mostly staffers from the Hill, and the room was loaded. People were standing. There were no as we say in Russian, there was no place for an apple to fall. So I mean, like, this is the audience right now. So these are the policymakers. These are the people whose work is connected somehow to international relations. These are the academic professionals, like students who are interested in affairs. So, of course, and I can share some. I mean, like right now, Meduza in English is mostly this daily newsletter, which is distributed on a daily basis. It's like the synopsis of the agenda in Russia, what happened in Russia while you were asleep, and it's basically just like the quick picture of the day, and people just grab the news, and sometimes they go by links. Sometimes that's enough for them just to know, just like get the general idea, and then go to their normal business. And I don't know, it's interesting fact, at least for me, that most of our readers in the United States are based in the Valley, so it's California. And it's interesting for me because I would assume, because I live in DC, and I interact with people who are DC people, and I got the impression that, yeah, like in DC, they always say, Meduza English, yeah, I know, I get that. I never been to Valley ever since we launched it, so I'm wondering why Valley. Perhaps because like a lot of there is such a like a lot of people migrated to the Valley and are trying to do something I don't know, to launch startups, and that's why their colleagues are interested. I don't know. I'm interested in that, and I would like to go there and to ask people around like why. But most of our people are now, most of the subscribers are in the valley. Now on the we're now trying to rethink a little bit the project and to go. To expand it, I would say, so to go to other formats, and it's to come. I'm not sure that I will be sharing everything here right now because it's still like in the works, but you're gonna see soon, I hope very soon, what we invented for the next days with basically with Meduza English. But yeah, that's a general idea. So to reach those who are interested and to whom we can help with our expertise and with our knowledge which we have in Russia.
But what I don't remember seeing on the English language page, which I don't look at so much anymore because of that email and because actually I thought the page didn't exist anymore until recently, I don't see advertising. Is there revenue for the English language?
No, not yet. Ideally, I would love to jump into that, but not at that stage.
So this is an investment basically at
Yep.
this point.
Yeah.
How many subscribers you have?
Actually, the last week I didn't look at that. I mean, like it's not tens of thousands, it's thousands right now. But this is a very targeted audience. So like it was the goal. And I mean, again, like right now, it's not. There is nothing on the site except like the subscription form and like some articles. Like very. So you really need to know how to go and to see like what is in archive right now. But again, it's going to be reinvention when we reopen the website, which we're going to do at some point. Very close to this day. We will talk about like the different numbers, like in terms of views. Now it's like subscribers, and you know that it's a very different. I would say how's it user scenario, because once you are subscribing to something, you're kind of sharing your private information with us. We have your email address, and we can. I actually address the audience. So sometimes I would ask on the. In the end of the or somewhere in the middle, like, do you want me to translate this for you? Because like I know most of the like who are these people, and I can like, and for example, I know how often you open it. Yeah, so yeah, that's the point. So it's like it's different.
Every day.
Yeah,
I
watching
know.
They
it.
don't understand Russian, right?
Yeah, I
That's
mean-
why they have to read.
Yes. So I mean, like, so it's like now we are growing, and we are growing on a very steady pace. So it's like it's every day, and I always and then these days it's I wouldn't say skyrocketed, but it expanded. The speed expanded because of the fact, I guess, that I brought them here, and like people get more and more acquainted with this new project too. But yeah, at this point, it's like, let's say thousands.
Well,
May I add something? You know, it's our principle. We never cover our numbers. Every month, our publisher Ilya Krasichik posts on Facebook all our numbers, audiences, sources of traffic, all these numbers you can read on his Facebook.
Well, one thing I like, by the way, about the newsletter is it contains links to your stories translated in English, but it also gives little capsule summaries of things that haven't been translated, and there's a link to go to Russian. For me, I just go and read the Russian.
Yeah.
But I think it could be useful for people who only need the capsule and get a sense
Yeah.
that there's more out there. So I think that's a really great
Yeah.
thing.
Good to
So
hear.
I guess we should
Just
open up to
yes.
the audience. Please. And please introduce yourself.
Hello, Dmitry Dubrovsky, Harriman Institute. I just wonder, have you ever been punished for the text? I mean, in terms of the counter-extremism legislation. I mean, and what is your policy in this perspective? So, do you have any restrictions, concerns, advisors for the police?
Sure.
Yeah.
We have two lawyers, one in European Union and one in Russia. And every time we are gonna publish some sensitive, we have to pay to two lawyers. So it's a little bit difficult. The main subject is Crimea. For sure, because maybe half a year ago we made this game. Do you know Russian geography? And
It looks like a map. You know,
It looks like a map.
there are some regions in the center, and you need to add Russian regions to the
to fill
the
in
core
all
of-
the map,
Yeah, and there is Crimea, and it's tricky. Should you add it? or you shouldn't?
because if we don't put Crimea, we will be prosecuted as a criminal.
In Russia.
In Russia. If we put, we will lose our Ukrainian readers. What? So
So what did you do?
So, what did you do?
Well, we consider Crimea as Russian, you know. That's all.
Это было-
All right, we made targeted maps for different countries. That's what we can do.
Yeah.
You know, you have to, you know, if you want to work in Russia, you have to work according to some even very stupid laws. You know, you can't. There are a lot of restrictions, and you have to remember about it. But we don't feel any. You know, I don't feel as an editor-in-chief. I don't see any, you know, editorial limitations for what we are doing. But I have to get consultations from, you know, our lawyers all the time, more or less. Every time I'm publishing something sensitive or something serious, some serious investigation, I have to check it with our lawyers. This is this is a common thing for Western media, which I think it even makes our standards better, eventually. But there are tricky, you know, things such as Crimea. There are tricky topics such as Crimea, and you know there are a lot of consequences of even for the journalists who are actually covering Crimea and Ukrainian issues. For example, one of our reporters, I'm not going to give you his name, but he traveled to Crimea, and it was his purpose to cross the border between you know, Russia to get to Crimea from the Russian side of the Black Sea, which is strictly forbidden for Ukrainian. You know, from the Ukrainian perspective, it means you're actually breaking Ukrainian law, and he was banned from, you know, visiting Ukraine. But at the same time, he's been covering a lot of Ukrainian topics, and also he had his girlfriend in Kiev. So it was a kind of a strange situation. But you know,
by trying to help, wrote letters to Ministry of Ukrainian ministries and officials, but he was banned for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Valeria and I'm a student at BMCC. I was wondering, if you didn't pay for subscription, can you still analyze your audience? Like if I didn't pay, can you still see?
You know, Google Analytics is not the only one metrics. We have, it seems to me, 5,
So you can still analyze
including
people who
in-house
didn't
metrics.
subscribe.
Yeah.
Okay, and another question, how many people work at Meduza?
You know, it's 39 in staff and about 50 freelancers.
And subscription is free. I feel like I'm giving an advertisement, but it is free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Please. Yeah.
For the daily letter, I was just wondering how do you pick your, because I'm obviously subscribed, how do you pick what to put focus on? Because you usually have like 3-4 links, it's not that much.
No, usually it's about 5-6 frees, like because there were national holidays like in May, so like it wasn't much of the news. Well, I don't know. We've been living in Russia for a while. We've been working in media for a while, so I would kind of get a sense of what is like. So for example, I start my morning very early, by the way, because I'm here. So for you to get it at 9, I need to wake up at 5-6. So I will be going through like major Russian media and analyzing like what stories are interesting and really make an impact, which are not, and then I would look at what people are actually discussing on the Facebook, because it's also important, because sometimes like some things which are sensitive for the opinion makers can kind of slip off the media, but you can pick up the link. I mean, so it's not in the major media, but for example, something written by Mediazona. It's a relatively new media source, which is very important because they cover issues on the police, prosecution, tortures in prisons and everything. And sometimes it won't be like in the major media outlets, but it is there and people are discussing this. And I would consider this also to be important. Like I would say, like we were the first, Meduza was the first media source to publish Ildar Dadin's. I think everyone knows who Ildar Dadin now, but we were the first ones to publish it in Russian, his letter, and then like other media were basically picking this story from there. So of course I would think that yes, this is the thing which we actually first need to translate, and secondly, of course, I need to put it on the newsletter because this is important. But yeah, it's like, I mean, common sense and the experience of living and working in the
because
field.
you know, at the very beginning we started email newsletters in Russia. in Russian, and we called it the shortest newspaper in the world. So, so
Sure. Just for people who don't know, Ilдар Danin is a Russian opposition activist who was put in prison and tortured there. So
And he wrote a letter, yes,
the
to
letters
his
were
wife.
from prison.
And now he's free.
He's free.
Oh,
He's
okay,
free.
can I hold my question a little
Sure.
bit? So basically the people who you're targeting, let's assume most of them live outside of Russia because they're reading in English. So would they be more interested in, let's say, Russia's like foreign affairs stuff or things that are happening inside? For instance, policymakers on the Hill, they're probably more, because the decisions they make, they affect mostly the way that US relates to Russia on a foreign level, while for some of them it might be important to have an understanding of like
You know,
random
it's
stuff that's
the
happening
two sides of the very same coin. One cannot exist without the other thing. So of course, like if something truly important in the field, and besides I majored in international relations in Columbia University, so I'm also have my master's from international affairs. I kind of little bit understand like how this world works. Of course, I will always, if I see something really like important in this field, of course it will be a newsletter. But I truly believe, and it's our like it was our initial idea that it's important to give our readers the understanding of what is on the agenda in Russia. So I mean, so they of course they will then like contribute to international affairs thing, but you need to understand you need to see the beast, like you need to understand it before you make any decisions, and for that it's important to see like how Russians are viewing the situation from the inside.
you know, may I add, every time somebody asks me, would you give advice to foreign media or something, stupid things like that, but frankly, when I open news websites, Western news websites or something like that, and I want to read about Russia, what can I see? It's all about Putin. Nothing except Putin. But Russia is much bigger than Putin. And we have very hot internal agenda. And we want, and it's the first thing. And second thing, almost in every Western newspaper, I can see the same experts and the same opinions. And it's very simple scheme or very simple point of view. Russia is much more complicated, and we do want to make somehow three-dimension vision to inside Russia.
Sure. Katie?
I was going to ask just about that actually, so I'm glad that you brought it up. Maybe I can ask you all to weigh in, but I think it was a few months ago you ran an article about that there was something, here are sort of the major problems with Western coverage about
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Russia.
Ivan's favorite topic.
Yes.
Right.
And I really enjoyed reading it, and I was very happy that that got translated into English so I could
Perfect.
send it to my friends because
Beautiful.
most people who were reading it
Beautiful
in Russian
strategy.
probably
Thank you so much.
We appreciate
for
it.
promo.
Yeah, I just thought it was great, and and as we've talked about how Russia is just in the American news so much more, and same with Ukraine as well. I was just wondering, so those were a few points of things that you feel could be better addressed. What are some other kind of trends that you see in Western coverage of Russia that you're really hoping to kind of challenge or expand on in your articles that are directed towards people in the U.S. and Europe who may not speak Russian?
Thank you,
This
that's
is
an
this
excellent
is this is an excellent question. This is what we're thinking of all the time right now. We see that there is a huge need in information about what actually happening in Russia or in Ukraine in this part of the world. And we can see this lack of expertise in almost everywhere, because even the best Russian experts in the States are really biased about what's happening in Russia. You're reading this David Remnick's piece, important article about what's happening between Russia and America, and and we do respect Remnick, and admire him, and he's one of the best specialists here in media in Russian affairs. and there are mistakes in the text. There are problems with the text, or you have these, New York Times dishonest newspaper.
It's failing.
Failing, sure,
Failing,
yeah, which is failing, and which is publishing, which is publishing Gary Kasparov, as a big expert in what's happening in
Double
Russia.
facepalm.
And what is this? What is our perception of what's happening? Editorial by Gary Kasparov, which is published in New York Times, humiliates our mind. It humiliates the oppositional movement in Russia. It humiliates New York Times itself, because, okay guys, can you find somebody else who will speak, about what's happening in Russian policy? So
They will not be a chess champion.
yeah, but what we are thinking of is not only criticizing, the discourse. We understand that the coverage is huge right now. It's huge topic, and the coverage is huge, and it means that there are the number of mistakes became, way bigger. So what we are trying to do is not to, only to criticize American or European media, but to bring our expertise to on the table. This is what we'll try to achieve. We understand what's actually, but we don't think about ourselves as a think tank which thinks about the future of Russia. We are not scientists. We are not political researchers and stuff like that. But we do know what's really happening in Russia. What is important, what is not important, who are reliable experts and specialists on Russian issues, and who are not. So this is really, this is an interesting topic, really interesting.
But bottom line, you guys are a tough crowd, really. You don't give me, a break, because I said we're gonna do something. You keep revealing.
Well, this is fine.
What
You're doing
yeah.
fine.
So
Brilliant.
This is
Thank you so
exactly
much
the
for the
plan.
Yes,
question.
this
But
is a very good question.
Yeah, and feedback is really priceless.
But at some point, you start thinking, you're waking up, and you start thinking, thank you, Vladimir Putin, because there is a huge interest to Russia eventually, because for years,
Yeah, it was
Western
our
people
chance.
didn't have any, interest in what's happening in Russia. A lot of, international TV channels closed the bureaus in Moscow and refocused on what's happening in the Middle East, and or something, or in Asia. And now they returned. Welcome, guys, and welcome to Russia.
Embrace you.
Yeah, Putin's been very good to us here too, sadly.
Yeah, no, I know.
Sure.
What a good
We
president
love
you
our
have.
newsmakers.
You're gonna love it. And fake news.
Maybe I will enter with a question here. So another reason to thank Putin for is exactly that you are located in Riga, and usually it's we discuss it with respect to what additional value it brings, additional freedoms that you enjoy there. I heard some complaints from the journalists that it's a small town, beautiful and scenic, but
Very boring.
but they get bored there, of course, as being journalists. But another question, and now you can, after a few years, you can speak from experience. Do you think there is any impact whatsoever on your journalism from the fact that you are not located in Moscow? You have reporters in Russia, but in terms of editorial coverage, do you pay any price to not being inside Russia?
And I was going to ask a similar question also in terms of access and coverage. I mean, has that changed for you since you moving from Lenta to Meduza?
As CEO, I'm happy that we're in Riga, and it's so boring city, because if we
Everyone.
stay in Berlin, they should be clubbing all night. What can you do in Riga? Just work and sleep. So I'm happy that we are in Riga.
Well, it's a massive question, actually. I think it is the first time in Russian history when somebody made really successful media outside Moscow. Because it's really hard to cover Russian issues if you are not based in Moscow, because 90% of Russian money are concentrated in Moscow. 99% of important political decisions are made in Moscow, which means that you have to be actually in Moscow. Okay, we have journalists in Moscow, of course. It wouldn't be possible to write about Russia and not be in Moscow. But at the same time, we're trying to make international Russian media. And we're trying to be a reliable source for all Russians who live in all these post-Soviet region. and also in Germany, in UK, in the States, in Israel, in the countries with huge, numbers of Russians, and we're trying to be an important source of information for them. Russian world, in a good definition, is way bigger than Russia. There are 350 million people who are speaking and reading Russian language, and it is a good metaphor to be now in Moscow and trying to develop international Russian-speaking media. Also, it is about when we started back to 2014. It was the year of, I think, it was definitely not the best year in Russian history and in the history of Europe. But what did we? The main word of 2014 is isolation. Russia seemed as a very isolated country. If you're watching Russian television, you see that Russia is surrounded by enemies again. And the world is more or less a complete disaster because migrant crisis in Europe, gays everywhere, more or less, and the guy who is actually not the guy is winning this Eurovision contest and stuff like that. And the USA is just, with this Barack Obama, and Barack Obama is definitely not very popular politician in Russia and stuff like that. So, and the European Union is a disaster, and it's destroying, and Ukraine, there is a war in Ukraine, and fascists conquered Kiev and so on. So, but our idea is that for many Russian people, Russia is a part of Western world, culturally, historically, in many ways. And when you're sitting in Riga, you can observe it more clearly that actually Russia is the part of the world, because there are so much in common between young Russians and young Americans and young Europeans. You just see that. It is not only about some cultural issues that they are watching the same TV series, they are watching, they're listening to the same music, they are reading the same books. But this is true, they're reading the same books, but also they are discussing the same topic, that they have so much in common when they're discussing about the world outside us. And and all these left liberal ideas that are discussed here in New York, which is the center of the world, many of these ideas are incredibly relevant to actually youngsters in Russia. They are also discussing new wave of feminism or LGBT rights. But they feel more depressed, of course, because they live in that complicated environment where people are imprisoned because they are playing Pokemon Go in church, or there is this gay propaganda law, but it only sharps the reality and it only sharps the ideas in many ways. So it is a very good question. I can answer it endlessly.
And maybe a little bit realistic. We're traveling to Moscow and back every month, and Air Baltic get much more revenue from Meduza than other companies. So we're buying tickets all the time. So we're trying to be in a very close connection to Moscow.
I just figured out where we are getting the translation of the broadcaster.
You mentioned earlier that you have these audiences in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan that you're not really targeting, but you do have them. And I just wanted to ask you about your leadership in the former Soviet space. How is it distributed? Is it a leadership that you're actively trying to cultivate, or one that completely exists by itself?
No, we do not make special content for them. but we're trying to cover hot topics in all post-Soviet space. Speaking about geography, we could say that almost 70% of our readers they are in Russia, 12% in Ukraine, 6% in Belarus. Then we have Israel, Germany, United States, UK, then Baltic states. And then more or less from 0.5% to 1.5% is in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and so on. So we have 124 countries in our geography.
Sure.
Yeah, just as a quick follow-up to that, within Russia and the 70% of the readers
Yeah.
who are in Russia, how many roughly are in, say, Moscow and Petersburg? And is there an effort to really, because I mean this myth of the two Russians and so forth.
For sure. Our audience live in big Russian cities. Moscow is number 1, St. Petersburg number 2, Novosibirsk, Krasnoyarsk, Yekaterinburg, and 6th place goes to London. Too many Russians in London.
Well, well, actually, the list
And
of
7th place is going to Kiev.
well, actually, the list of the cities gives you more relevant picture than the list of the countries.
What about New York?
We need to check it. Can't tell you right now.
Couldn't remember. Just.
Sure.
Sorry, I didn't introduce myself earlier. Kaitsa, Human Rights Foundation. My question is actually also about your audience. Ivan, you mentioned that you cater, like most of your readership is in Facebook, and it's mostly young people, so it's more liberal-minded people who are already, in a way, in a position or critical of the government. So basically, your readership is people who essentially agree already with that position. Do you know how much? Well, first of all, whether that's correct, and second of all, how much traction do you think we have with like Kremlash people or like people who are like on the verge?
You know, maybe we were not so correct because we try to diversify our social media traffic. We have 36% from Twitter, 32% from Facebook, and it's 24 or something from VKontakte. You know, they are more or less equal at first. And second, my favorite example about our readers. Once we checked whether siloviki
Are reading
Meduza,
Meduza, yeah.
Meduza, and we made special piece. We know for sure all the IPs, and we made special piece about our readers. The most popular, our devoted readers are working for General Prosecutor Office, then Roskomnadzor, its main Russian watchdog, and then Investigative Committee.
And we know for sure, because we have based on the information we got from our sources, we know for sure that all employees of the president administration are starting
devoted
from
readers.
Meduza.
Yeah, and it's funny. Once
But this is just because it's probably it's interesting media. That's why they do it.
Yeah, I have one fun fact. My very close friend, she was at some party with oligarchs and Kremlin administration officials, and one of them said, "I like Meduza very much. I read them every day, but I do what I can to shut them down because they are enemies. I do not need this truth. Why they are telling this truth? I do not want to live in their world. I read them every day, but I do whatever I can to shut them."
Never underestimate the power of denial, you know.
This is the question you're asking is relevant to the American circumstances more or less, because you have these elite liberal biased media, left liberal biased media, who failed newspapers, and the nation and common people who live here and there. What we know for sure is that there is a part of society we can't reach because we just can't reach them, because they're not gonna switch to the channels of our channels of distribution of the content. There is a huge part of the society which is consuming news on television, and they never gonna start, you know, using internet. It is older people. Unfortunately, we're not trying to reach these people, but we're trying to reach people who are young and who are consuming news from television and from some occasional internet resources, and we're trying to become interesting for them. And eventually, we're not, you know, this is our main scare, not to work for these. This is your favorite expression.
Referral groups.
Referral groups. You know, when you know what they like and you're making what they like. No, we're trying to be.
We're trying not to be a Facebook group bubble.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's why probably we are not that. You know, in many ways from the professional community or liberal community, we are not considered as, you know, the best media. There are a lot of
serious media.
Criticism from
Oh,
that
it's all
side.
about gaming. They are joking all the time.
But from the readers, we're getting, well, enough, you know, feedback to realize that we are doing something relevant.
And you know, we have special small project called Reactions, and 3 buttons. I know much more about this topic, and I want to give you some information, and I want to discuss. You know, and we're watching very closely all the reactions, all about their reactions, and we are trying to exchange audiences with those media who have no same goals or same purposes. For example, we make those project Meduza's Friends. And there is, for example, sports.ru. Sports.ru.
Which is
It's
good.
absolutely different audience, and we want just to attract different audiences through such projects.
Unfortunately, this is it creates a lot of, you know, problems in this group. You're thinking that they are your friends and supporters, you know, because they are your friends and supporters. But when you're starting criticizing, I don't know, the program of Alexei Navalny, you're making a piece about that. Well, this is, you know, this is journalism. This is just the coverage. We're writing about him because he's creating a lot of reasons to write about him. He's publishing his program. There is the document we can discuss. Or Novaya Gazeta is publishing some investigation, which is
So-called
investigation about these groups of death, which is, and we understand that and right after that, the state media starts using these investigation about so-called group of death to, you know, ask the parliament, to ask the authorities to create one more law which restricts internet, and we understand that this is really bad investigation, all right, and the state media will use this bad investigation in their purposes. They're gonna use it as a weapon against internet. And we are criticizing this article, and it becomes the topic of the discussion because, look, you know, guys, we all so-called liberal media.
We're all friends.
How can we, you know, criticize each other? Which is a common thing, for example, for American media who are, you know, desperately struggling and criticizing each other and having some competition. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't give you. Support from that, liberal
Professional
part.
community.
The story he's referring to is, for those of you who might not know, is about internet groups for teenagers who are interested in suicide, and that became a huge thing.
Yeah, well, it's possible. Speaking about competitors, well, do you see any other media who play the same role now in the Russian internet? Because as a consumer, I can remember former Slon, the Republic, Znak. Do you consider them as competitors or?
Sure, they are much smaller than us, but we are trying to watch them very closely. I'm absolutely paranoid to watch them and to figure out what they invented, what new appeared, and I feel envy for all of them, for all good pieces. And I'm control freak, and I saw competitors everywhere.
As the editor of BuzzFeed, Ben Smith, says, we are all competitors in the internet because we all compete for the attention of readers. We're trying to be one of the most important sources for readers, because we know for sure that you are visiting some websites, not that list but that list, and we want to be in that small list of the most important and reliable sources for you.
Once a Radio Liberty site, svoboda.org, they offered us a very strange way of cooperation. I said, guys, we are competitors. They say, no, we are writing about such topics and you're writing about these topics. And I say, guys, field of competition is Russian-speaking audience. We all are competitors.
Sure.
If I must push the topic a little back to your English-speaking audience, and that the BuzzFeed was mentioned here. So, why are you gonna do this on your own? Why are you gonna enter this highly competitive market? I mean, I understand what you're gonna bring to it in terms of knowledge about Russia, good understanding of Russia. But on the other hand, you need huge resources to compete on this market, even with BuzzFeed. So maybe to cooperate with them would be better, unless you have a commercial.
We are cooperating. We are cooperating. We're not trying to become an important player on the international American or English-speaking media market. We don't have enough resources. So far.
So far.
Let's meet a couple of years later and then we'll discuss
Yeah,
it
because
again.
like everyone, you are asking like, yeah, we are Braveheart. I mean, like now I can say we with them, but like at the first time in 2014, I was admiring. So I was here in the United States and like on my own, just in the university, and people would invite me to come talk about of course Alexei Navalny and about like the situation with Russian media, and they would ask me like, so do you see any hope? And I would say, because I was goodwill ambassador at that time, not an employee, I would say, guys, Meduza, look what they're doing. It's 2014, it's the worst year in the Russian, not worst, okay, there were a lot of bad years in the Russian history, but one of the worst. Yeah, and they're still doing it. I mean, like what they did is a miracle. I mean, in the first place, like, and the very situation when Galina was fired from Lenta.com, sorry, and then the 70 people just stood and said, okay, because we're not playing this game like this, we're not going to be under the pro-Kremlin guy when you are hiring like the person whom we entrust and whom we consider to be reliable and just unbiased, and after that they just go to the other country and do this, and now we have 7 million of
7.3 million users per month.
And it's been like not so long, so I mean like and you are trying to scare us with with the area where people are used to compete. Well, we are also prepared for this fight, but it's not the fight.
We are cooperating with BuzzFeed
right now.
with Guardian, with Quartz.com, with
We are not cooperating with the New York Times.
Yes.
Angry guy.
But no. But I think we can be mutually beneficial.
We do investigations with BuzzFeed, and they published some pieces, our pieces, and we published. And Ben Smith wrote very good piece about us.
Complimentary.
A very complimentary article about us.
Yeah, and so we have a list of our friends we want to cooperate with, but still now we are just developing English version.
But we're
reinvented it.
We're developing it and we're on it. No worries.
Sure.
I've got your back.
Thanks so much again for Meduza, for everything. I want to ask two things, I think. So, first, why Latvia? Why Riga? I understand that Berlin is too vibrant.
Not
there's
too
also
vibrant.
Vilnius and Tallinn, or even smaller.
Riga is the biggest city in the Baltics.
Yeah.
It almost 700,000 population, and in Riga we have 46% of Russian speakers.
So
we do need to live in a language environment, in Russian language environment. not to lose our language skills, not to feel this street language, you know.
And well, that's very understandable. But now that you are on the territory of the EU and Latvia,
Sure.
do you feel any support or the control from Latvia on the one hand, and then from the European Union on the other?
Latvia communicate with us in the best way. They invited me to Minister of Foreign Affairs, asking, do I need some help? I say, guys, no, thank you. They say, you're welcome here, and they forget about us. Thank you. It's the best way to communicate with us. Speaking about European Union, sure. European Commission and European Union, they helped us, and it's not a secret. They helped us at first, and we are taking part in every conference they held. Yeah.
Sure, again.
Yeah, so you mentioned, my name is Evgeny, PhD student at NYU. So you mentioned this, how these big media outlets are using bad investigations. So I have like a broader question about fake news, about how they're using fake news. So there's a lot of evidence that people are actively looking for information that doesn't contradict their beliefs, like so-called confirmation bias. And taking into account the fact that I think at least 70% of Russian citizens actually do support Vladimir Putin, don't you think that this fake news is just like a smart technique that media outlets are using to attract loyal audience? Like, what proportion of this fake news do you think is coming directly from the Kremlin?
It's very complicated question, because fake news, the history of fake news in Russia started 20 years ago, and for example, these big story in American media are surprised that the press secretary of the president can lie directly to their faces. Wow, really?
Let's remember Sergei Yastrzemsky speaking about Boris Yeltsin and his visit to Ireland.
Yeah.
And about his working with documents.
The documents. Or 1996, when the people from the most respectable, the biggest, the most important Russian newspaper, Kommersant, started producing propaganda, newspaper against the communist candidate.
How does it be in English?
Elections.
God forbid.
God forbid. With the main God forbid. Or Russian TV channels just manipulated the audiences to elect Boris Yeltsin, which means that Russia has very old traditions of creating fake agenda and fake news. It means, when people say that, this is really strange situation that the CEO and the chiefs of these national TV channels, which are known within Russia as Putin's propaganda, these people are from 1990s. They created that respectable, independent, and quality television in 1990s. Guys, you just forgetting the facts that the television wasn't really good, and they always took part in the political game, and it wasn't like Fox News, because Fox News is, you're right, they're trying to get as much audience as possible, and they're using Trump as a tool to get to attract the audience. And but the TV channels in Russia, they took part in creating fake agenda for years during all historical moments. And so right now I would say that if you're talking about the fake news which are created and distributed by the TV channels, yes, it is created by Kremlin, more or less.
We traced usual way of fake news. We just made some research about fake news about us, ourselves.
Yeah.
Every time you can see very small political site, something like Polit Online, or something like that. Shitty полицай. I said.
Yeah, it's kind of a corporate culture now, I assume. Because like in every meeting we went, public, not public, Ivan would say
I'm
shit.
awfully sorry. I'm
Yeah.
awfully sorry.
So now
You
it's
didn't
like,
hear it.
Welcome to the.
Ivan,
Shit.
this small site, like for example, Readus.ru, they published initially this fake news, and then Russia Today or Sputnik or First Channel or Vesti.ru, they distributed it to the wider audience. Or Izvesti. It's something like the same way, you know. So if you see the same way, maybe it's the same owner of these ideas. So it seems to me that a lot of fake news produced directly by Kremlin administration.
It doesn't seem that one thing that's changed in the 90s, and yes, they were setting the agenda and making fake news all the time, is the sheer, naglist, the sheer chutzpah of the extent to which they're happy just lying ridiculously on TV in particular.
And everyone's doing it, this is how that's why young people, for example, that angry, because it is so obvious. It's like cat who is trying to hide behind, the занавеска, curtain, and then
There's one question there.
Hi, my question, my name is Jonathan. Thank you for excellent talk, by the way. Thank you all.
Thank you.
For what you do. My question is actually about the term fake news itself, because it entered really the nomenclature of English, after following the election. And since then, one could argue that the term has been, anything, it has a high potential for abuse by people like Donald Trump, who just calls every media, everybody that it doesn't like, fake news. And then I just would like to ask your opinion about the actual, term fake news itself and how it could, how it can be potentially abused and how it has been abused.
I love this. I love the way fake news became, the term that Trump uses, because this is what actually happens in Russia with everything, literally with everything. Because when you're saying because Vladimir Putin is always, he always speaks about breaking the law in,
about Pussy Riot,
yeah, for example, yeah. So he's just. When you have no ideology, when you can use any word to name anything, and there is no structure, there is no logic behind this. This is actually what helps the guys like Trump and Putin to hack political systems all over the world, right? Because they are always, you say you have a next Crimea, and he says you have a next Hawaii. You have a next this and that. Your army is in Europe. You're making a war in Europe, and he says you're making a war in Yugoslavia, in Serbia. You've been bombing Europe.
Your police is beating people on the streets, and you have Baltimore.
Yeah, and then you have this, and in many, and why do common people believe in that? Because in many ways it is true. It sounds logic. It sounds reasonable, because is New York Times biased?
New York Times will say yes. And
Well,
sure.
it's actually true, but it's a logical fallacy. It's more
Absolutely. But this is, I'm not a thinker. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a media theory person. Thank God. I'm just the practitioner. Yeah, I'm just trying to do journalism, and I understand that there is a space for the real journalism. Even in that circumstances, you need to reconstruct the concept of trust between the readers and the media. And you need to level up the media literacy among people. I think 20 years later, everyone will be aware of what is fake news and how to, for example, fact check, basic things on internet. It's just gonna be the common knowledge. Why it is not the common knowledge right now? Because we haven't lived in that type of the world previously. It's just something new that just happening, and we need to make some mistakes. We need to elect Trump, Donald Trump.
But there's one thing. There's one thing that I keep asking myself and others, because I can't quite come up with an answer that satisfies myself on this. So in the late Soviet period, my impression was always that actually Soviet TV viewers, Soviet media consumers were so much more intelligent as media consumers than in the West, because they were certain, a good portion of them were certain they were being lied to, and so they were able. So they were able to have a skeptical attitude. So getting from that to the polls, the opinion polls, to the extent that they show anything that suggests that people are actually believing the even more outrageous lies on television now. I mean, how do we get from that sophistication to this gullibility?
Galina has the brilliant answer to this.
Nope. Nope. Not at all.
The
Not
question
at
about
all.
like the readers of Pravda, they understood that they were lied to, and they
Exactly.
tried to infer between the lines what is actually
Yeah, we are
said. How this
masters
skill is
in
lost
reading
now.
between the lines.
Exactly.
Can,
and
can I
now-
reformulate your question
Please.
to make it easier for Galina? What is the difference between the Soviet propaganda and the current propaganda, and how does it affect the people?
Or the
You know,
Soviet
the que-
people?
Why the readers
question
was
is
the skill?
absolutely different. The difference between Soviet propaganda and nowadays propaganda is that Soviet propaganda shows bright future to their audience. Yeah, they said, okay, we are living not so good as we want to, but our kids will live in a better world. We are struggling for communism. We are struggling for living in a very good world. What does Putin's propaganda do? They said there is no truth at all. We are among enemies, but we had our own truth. You had our own truth, but we had great past, and you had not. No word about future, no word about vision, about strategy, you know. And you know, I have my favorite example about. Did you see this great lecture of Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz? And he said, my favorite phrase, I speak perfect accent, almost without English. So Viktor Frankl, he read a lecture, and he said, I'm 72 and I'm learning how to управлять самолетом.
Pilot the plane.
I'm learning to be a pilot, and my instructor said, if you want to reach from point A to point B on this line, you should fly higher.
Sure.
Because this wind will bring you to the point B, and when you fly like this or lower, you never reach this point. Speaking about audience, if you want your audience to be equal to themselves, you should write and think of them higher than they are. You should call for the best feelings in their souls, for the best minds. If you are calling for the lowest part, you'll be lower, lower, and lower, and your audience will never be equal to themselves.
Sure.
Is it understandable?
Yes, it's
Thank
great
you.
point.
Yeah, thank you
Please.
very much. So sorry for interrupting again. So I just a little bit concerned about your term bias. Because that's, you know, there's different parts of biases we could see. For example, there's bias of Dave Tremnick or bias of Stephen Cohen. So
Yeah.
there's a different biases, right?
Right.
A little bit. So
Steven is not here.
He's not here.
yeah, unfortunately. But that's my question is: do you see the difference between the, you know, the counter propaganda in the way? Sometimes in European Union they consider the counter propaganda against Russian TV, for example, and the kind of providing objective truth. I'm a little bit concerned about this term bias because it seems to me a little bit different from the professional standards. I mean the journalistic standards. So instead of providing the contradiction experts, for example, to balance your message, you're thinking. It seems to me you're thinking about the somewhere there is the objective truth about Russia, for example, and that's we should just fight against bias and we will achieve it.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite answer. Sorry, I said it once, maybe twice, but I do not want to fight against. We are journalists. We are not counter propagandists or propagandists. I do not want to fight against. I want to fight for. I want to fight for my audience. I want to fight for verified information. I didn't say truth.
Yes.
Verified information, and that's all. I'm not a fighter like against. I'm fighter for.
I think you've been talking to me because I use this word many times today. I think it is not the bias itself is not the problem. What we really need to achieve is to discuss that there is a bias. And and you have to tell yourself when you're a journalist or an editor that you really are a biased person because you're living in this country, having
Make some kind of full disclosure.
And you're trying, every time you're making this work, you're trying to be out of this, biased structure. And sometimes it is ridiculous. Like, for example, like the list of experts, Russian so-called Russian experts in American media. It is ridiculous because it is the same people who are not experts at all. And why are they remain the experts in American media? Because they are providing convenient thoughts and ideas to
simple picture
to media because some American media think that they know how the world works, and they are trying to find to pick these columnists, these journalists, because this is what relevant to what they think about the. I'm not, this is what I observe and this is what I actually experience because one newspaper, I've been writing letters to one American newspaper, which is huge, and huge. Huge. This is something that happens with you. I don't know. All right, which is huge, and and I wrote them. I just pointed a finger to the article that we have just published. It was about Chechen people who are running from the regime from Chechnya, from Ramzan Kadyrov to European Union, and through Belarus, and they're crossing the border with Poland. And these people are speaking loudly. This is a very rare thing because these people are speaking openly about what's happening in Chechnya and how does regime acts right now. And it is a very important thing because for couple years you've got no information about what's happening in Chechnya because civil rights activists can't really work, human rights activists can't really work there, journalists can't really work there, people are scared to death and they are not speaking openly. So you have this list of people who came from Chechnya and they're running from regime of Ramzan Kadyrov to Poland, to the European Union, and they're speaking, how does it work like? And I wrote a letter to this American newspaper, and I wrote that, guys, I think this is what really important, and this is what you should actually, probably you need to make some follow-up story, or we can provide you information, we can provide you sources, and so on and so on and so on. And we published this story. What happened in Russia?
And distributed.
What happened in Russia when we published this story? A huge scandal, appeared because because a lot of people said these people are terrorists from Chechnya. They're running because they don't want to be prosecuted as a terrorist. And some stupid, crazy Russian member of the parliament wrote a letter to the general prosecutor to check
check for extremism.
Check extremism in the article.
Yeah.
No, another one.
There's so many to
Never
choose
mind.
from.
The names are not important. So I'm writing the letter to this newspaper. Just to well, probably I understand that it is a really important and really huge topic, and he answers like I think the topic is not really interesting, but maybe you can write an op-ed how the officials in Russia are prosecuting you for publishing this brilliant investigation. So, and I'm thinking, wow, because it is nothing. They are not prosecuting us. Just some crazy member of the parliament wrote a letter to the general prosecutor and there is a scandal. But this is how it works. This is what I'm talking about. If I would get the letter from some regional editor from anywhere, which is writing to me that, there is this topic, and probably you should, read it closely. This is that type of I'm scared of I'm scared to become that type of editor, which thinks that he knows what is more really relevant and interesting. Because this is I think that the answer was not professional. I think that they didn't even try to go through the story.
What is more important, lives of these Chechen people, or our letter from insane deputy to the General Prosecutor Office?
Yeah.
They, actually, some of American media just want us to look like a victim, because one very respectful American newspaper, they want to write an article about me, and correspondent, we talked, and then he returned me, said, my editor said there is no drama. If they detain you at the border or put you behind bar, it will be great for us. And now you are working, you are very successful, you have revenue, so doesn't.
Who cares?
Who cares about it? They want us to look like
So,
victims.
and you really, if you're a journalist, if you have that experience, you have the experience of working as a reporter or an editor, of course you're looking for the best story. You're trying to get, the hot topic. It is normal. We have to tell interesting stories. We don't have to tell not interesting stories. We have to, write about news, not about not news. But sometimes, you're just you
stand behind walls.
Yeah.
So I think it's about time to wrap up.
Yep.
Our guests need at least a little time before it rains to walk about our fair city. So thank you all so much for coming here.
Thank you.